Welcome to The Last of Yinz, a podcast review of the HBO series The Last of Us. Every week we will review the newest episode in the series, give you our impressions from 4 different and unique perspectives, as well as our thoughts on how it holds up to the game. You can join in on the conversation by contacting us at thelastofyinz@gmail.com. And remember, when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light.
Greetings, everybody from the QZ. How is everybody today?
Good.
Pretty good.
Good?
Oh, your name and shit.
Oh, yeah.
The QZ.
I like that.
The QZ.
I am one of your hosts, Mal, and I have played all the games in this series on which this TV show is based. Today, I'm joined by Shannon to my left.
Hi, I'm Shannon. I have never played the game. I'm picking up a lot as we go. I'm enjoying the show, and they had me back again.
Oh, aren't we sweet? To her left is Sean.
My name is Sean Scully. I've played the game, watched a lot of content. Big fan.
Excellent. And to his left, Corey.
My name is Corey, and I'm a alcohol. I played the game, the 1, not the 2, and not the extras.
Excellent. Okay. And this week we will be tackling the episode number 2.
Tackling fuel.
Sure. The Last of Us episode 2, Infected. Just a little breakdown of what we're going to do each week here is that we will review each episode as we see it each week, and we will go spoiler-free up into the show that we're watching currently. No spoilers from the game, no spoilers from the next week on that's at the end of the episode. So in general, what's everyone feeling? How did you like this week's episode?
Well, first of all, before we do that, I do want to say
Yes.
that a lot of us are new to the podcast world, and Mal is one of them. And he will learn that when I make a noise, to ignore me or face. When I do something like that, just don't reinforce my negative behavior.
Ignore Corey's face.
Yes.
Generally speaking, I've always taken that into consideration. So, again, any thoughts on this week's episode? Anything that you thoughts or feelings right off the top?
One thing, because I watched it multiple times, that I will tell Corey is there's a lot of second watch content. You go through this episode one time, you're not going to catch everything. If you go through a second time, you're going to see things you learned later and be like, oh, look there. That, oh, my God. There's just a lot of moments like that.
Right.
I don't want to dig into the details before we get to the scene.
Yeah, just getting overall thoughts. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I only watched it once, and that was just because of the fact that I did not find myself with time. I was occupied with other things. But I thought it did an excellent job of kind of capturing the spirit of the game.
Yeah.
And, the terror of it a little bit, and somehow still beautiful, eerily beautiful at the same time, right? Like
that is true.
the nature reclaiming everything.
Yeah.
I watched it 3 times, and I rewatched the first one.
Oh, nice.
And rewatching the first one, I decided I'm really a big fan of that Depeche Mode song. I'm listening to it on repeat.
Yeah, that is it is a catchy tune there. So yeah, that's I was hoping that we would get a little bit more of those, but so far we have not. But I guess we'll find
I think
out.
that'll be back.
I think so too. So we'll move right into it here. We're just going to kind of break this down scene by scene and see what we feel about this. We are going to open this week with another flashback of sorts. This time we are heading back to September 24th. And if you recall, this is approximately 2 days before the actual breakout day, or if you prefer, 2 days before Joel's birthday.
September 24th, what year?
I think that's 2003, right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Because it's 20 years later.
Mhm.
Yeah. We open the scene by settling into an overhead shot of Jakarta, Indonesia, which, if you remember, is where we heard on the radio in the first episode that things were kind of going awry. We come upon a restaurant where an unnamed woman is being taken into custody by local authorities. She's concerned she's committed a crime. A slight relief crosses her face when it is revealed that she is tapped because she is a professor of mycology at the University of Indonesia. We continue with them to a facility where she is to examine a microscope slide preparation with what she identifies as the cordyceps fungus, and she is shocked to learn that this is from a human.
I like how she initially notes that it's not prepared the right way.
Mhm.
She says
Yeah.
it's in the wrong chemical, And that's like the first clue to her that something's wrong. But let's go back to the diner because,
Yes, absolutely.
yo, this lady does a great job of selling the fact that she is like shitting herself the whole time. Like she looks terrified, has no idea what's going on. And she freaking sells it the
she
whole
looks
way
like
through that scene.
The type that probably has never done a bad thing in their entire life and now finds themselves in the back of a cop car.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
The contrast in cultural reaction too. I mean, she went along just because the authorities told her to do so. It wasn't until she got into the car that she spoke up for herself and said, "Did I commit a crime?" Like I don't know. I was just picturing Stan from the South Park, his dad, like, "This is America. What'd I do? I thought I could do whatever I want."
It was not America, which is probably a big reason that she did not put up a fuss.
A little bit different.
Yeah, so Indonesia, I suppose, then, not just from the first episode, them speaking about it on the news initially, but it seems like it is actually ground zero. This is because they even go into where it started and everything. And
right. So if we follow that path, she's doubting that assertion that it came from a human. So they lead her into an examination room where she's going to basically examine the source of the specimen. She's presented with the corpse of a woman who has a nasty human bite and a handful of, I'm going to say, not squash noodles. The sight of which sends her running from the room.
Right from the launch of this scene, you get that shot of the emerald hallway, the tile. It's very sterile. She's walking through in space with no other people in it. Very clearly, she's walking into what I would presume is a secure bunker. And I think they reinforced it with that. Yeah. 2 guards, blocking the door. And she gets into the room, they explain everything to her. And yeah, the corpse scene, oh my God.
That was crazy. Yeah.
Who else was sitting there staring at the bullet hole in her head going like, she can't kill this lady, right? Like she's dead.
Yeah,
right.
Dead,
I wasn't sure either.
But you
I noticed a lot of reactors were very terrified of her reaching into the mouth with her fingers, like she's gonna bite her. She's gonna bite her.
Oh man, I feel like an idiot, but I'm now shocked because it didn't occur to me to think of that. And we've seen. I mean,
that did not cross your mind at all.
It really didn't.
I really thought she was putting 2 fingers in and none were coming out.
I guess I felt really safe in a room surrounded by guards where they'd been watching her for a couple of days. I'm not sure
it's
why.
It's that bunny suit that makes you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So now we have our patient zero. The professor is advised of the full scope of the situation. It seems that workers at a local flour and grain factory, as it turns out, is a perfect substrate for the fungus growth, suddenly turned violent, attacking and biting their coworkers. In the end, some were killed, but the identity and location of the first biter and 14 others is as of yet unknown.
When he told her, if you're feeling sick, leave the room quickly, and she soldiered through until that fungus moved. You guys just brought it up. I mean, it really wasn't completely dead. The fear in her eyes was very good.
She left the room quickly.
Well, the host was dead, but when they said that, I was thinking, if she's feeling sick, shouldn't you keep her in the room?
I think she meant nauseated, not.
Right.
I know, but still at the same time, right?
I don't think it would have been sick by infection. It would have been more sick because she is a mycologist, not a
doctor.
She doesn't perform autopsies. Fair. Normally, she's looking at fungus.
She definitely reacted to the bullet wound in the head.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and whenever she said, "Is this bite from a human?" The look on her face, and even the other guy, the way he nodded his head, it was very tense.
Yeah. And then she has this reaction when she's told that there's 14. Like it's not 3 missing, it's 14, and it's just like a nice random kind of number that's like, that sucks.
Watching her hands start shaking as I believe she asked what happened to them, or what happened to the 3, and are there any other workers missing? And he reaffirmed that the 3 and another 14 aren't anywhere. They're lost in the city.
Yeah, that's when she starts shaking. That she plays that so well, and that goes back to what you said about her just nailing that, and like this, you can see that. Oh shit! Sit like across her face, and you're just like,
oh yeah, she knows that it's over. Just bomb the whole city. I want to go be with my family, but just kill us all to save everybody else.
I think there's another cultural line difference drawn there. I just don't think a Western doctor would have reacted in the same way. They probably would have been more resistant or combative in some way. And whenever she said bomb everything.
I was surprised.
I was kind of shocked at that response. It really set me back on my heels. And the eyes of the guy who arrested her, well, I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I don't think he gets a name.
My Lord, they were wide and his jaw was slack and he was feeling probably a lot like I was.
Yeah. And just the way she delivers that word, it's like they picked the perfect word. I mean, bomb is the word, but the fact that translates directly to English without subtitles is
bomb.
And that's all she says. And then, she breaks down and, she wants to go back to her family, basically saying that there's no vaccines. There's nothing that we can do here that's going to, help this other than just blow it all up. I do want to point out at this point, there are some little things here that I don't know if you guys noticed regarding where this all started.
I missed the Jakarta detail until you just pointed it out just now. How they played that on the television whenever Sarah was wondering.
Educated us that Jakarta was the capital of Indonesia.
But not so much that, but
the
where
substrate stuff,
where
like the flour.
Yes, at a flour and grain factory.
So I expected as soon as they said substrate, I thought of Sean, because Sean is into plants, botany, I suppose you could say, not quite that way, but then fish, and so it's like a substrate is a terminology here in both of those hobbies.
Aquatic gardening.
Yeah, fucking nerd. But I thought like, oh yeah, he's gonna be all up on top of that. But
the factory deal, the way it started, in what's I would say impoverished, labor-based neighborhood, didn't surprise me. It's a detail that made sense. It just kind of clicked in my mind. But it was the Jakarta connection from the radio that I did not make, and that's.
But more specifically, what's being missed here is that this is a flour and grain factory, and that this is where this thing would start.
Okay.
And if you take notice, especially in the first episode, this is pointed out. And if you do listen to, and I suggest you do listen to the podcast from the official Last of Us podcast from HBO, where the actual creators talk about this, is they're talking about leaving breadcrumbs about everything you see is like leaving breadcrumbs about what's going on here. And bread is very important here.
Right.
Because if it's in the flour, if it's in a grain factory, if you go back to the first episode,
oh my God,
the neighbors are trying to offer them biscuits that's being fed to grandma.
Oh,
I whiffed on that. And
me too.
Gonna have to watch it for a third.
She goes over to the house, and what's the older lady making? She's making cookies.
Mm-hmm.
She misses that.
Love details like that.
Go back even further.
The birthday cake would have been a bad idea then.
That's another one. The birthday cake got avoided. They are, and also too the pancakes. There's no pancakes for them in the morning. They're all dodging bullets. Well, most of them are.
Wow.
My goodness.
It's very much like a 9/11 story, right? Like if somebody hadn't T-boned my car that morning, or like if I hadn't been sick or whatever, I would have been on the 93rd floor. Kind of, I know that's a more serious thing, but it's very much a, hey, putting all those things there to make sure that people can't say, well, why wouldn't they have it?
Yeah.
I think I made it very clear last week that I'm a huge fan of Easter eggs, and I said I was going to go collect some, and then it occurred to me I'm looking for Easter eggs in a show about a game, and it's like the whole thing's a goddamn Easter egg.
Yeah.
And now you're showing me they still exist. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love
and this goes back to they can't use spores because they don't want to wear masks. So we're going to do this alternate way. We're going to have it go this way.
Right.
And I think that plays into it.
And next time I see a little bit of mold in the bread bag, I'm incinerating it.
We'll continue on from there. We continue jumping back forward to current day, if you will, 2023. We get started with a very beautiful overhead shot of Ellie sleeping in a sunlit patch of earth just inside a nature-consumed salon under the watchful and untrusting eye of Joel and Tess.
This was a great scene. Ellie woke up. She's sitting in a scene right out of Skyrim, the glowing green grass. She's sleeping on a bed of moss. She wakes up, looking at the sunlight. She turns around and there's Joel with a rifle.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. And
Tess looked pretty intense.
They go on to discuss, basically Ellie's lack of infection and how she came to be in the hands of the Fireflies in the first place. Tests go back and forth on what they should do and whether they should turn back or keep going. There's a little bit about her having to use the restroom and saying, is there anything bad back there? And they're like, just you.
I feel like this is the moment where Tess first shows that she's starting to believe.
Yes.
Well, I think too, they're starting to set the rules for this apocalypse, right? Because Shannon, from a lack of experience, and me from being so far removed from playing the game, could not answer her. But she asked, she says, how are we out here in the, like, you know, we should be overrun. You know what I mean? They're kind of painting the picture of like, no, there's some spaces that it's not like that. They're not everywhere. And they give you a little bit more of that later on. I don't want to touch until we get there, but I couldn't answer her right away. I was like, I don't remember if it's when it gets dark out or what the situation is.
Most of this is very much just a show invention, filling in spaces that you wouldn't go into the game. So like, you know, how they get to the point where they're finally on their way to where they're going.
Does anyone remember what Tess's direct response was when Ellie made that comment? I thought there were swarms everywhere.
We don't get a reaction to that, I think, until a little bit later in terms of she's asking about the specific infected.
I feel like it was something along the lines of "Don't believe everything you hear" or something like that. Because then I think something else comes up, and she's like, "Well, you could believe some of it or something to that nature," but I could be mistaken.
Right.
Sorry, continue.
Oh, you okay? Okay.
I was just thinking of whenever Ellie asks her about, because it happened right here when she starts asking her about the super infected, which is something we remember from the game if you've played the game, who throws spores at you, and Tessa's response, "Oh, I hope not."
Yeah, you guys are getting way ahead though. I really wanted to talk about
Did I jump out? I apologize.
Yeah.
Her whenever Tess was asking how she was being tested. And then Ellie's response whenever she said, "But you know what? I think what really impressed them is that I didn't turn into a fucking monster."
Yeah, that's really great.
I thought that was hilarious.
I love all of her sass. You know, when she comes back and she's like, "You know what? I've been through a lot, and you don't need to talk down to me," which kind of comes into later, where she's like not talking down to her. She's like, "I'm going to talk to you like you're an adult." And you know what's actually going on and how you came into the Fireflies and why they're protecting you.
I'll be interested to know at some point whether or not this actor has played the game. And the reason I ask
Which one?
The young lady.
Oh, no, she has not. She did watch. She wasn't supposed to, but she did watch some.
Yeah, okay. Because I was told, from the accompanying podcast, it said that he specifically instructed the actors not to watch the cutscenes from the game. He wanted them to deliver their own flavor. And this little girl, she time after time, the scene in the window where she's staring out and says, "It's so dark." I mean, I remember that. The sun fading off half of her face. Whenever she makes these sassy little lines, she delivers them very reminiscent of Ellie from the game.
Well, one thing I do want to point out, and I did skim over, unfortunately, and I'm mad at myself now, but this episode is directed by Neil Druckmann.
The game creator.
Yes, this is his directorial debut in terms of live action.
And he was wonderful in the accompanying podcast, too. His excitement, he just really seemed to enjoy the process, and you know, you get caught up in his excitement.
So he's going to give direction. It's very specific to what he gave direction to the actors in the original game. Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, they played the main characters, and so he's going to direct them probably very similarly, because they did all the voiceover work too. So they're going to get very similar direction. And I think he knocked it out of the park. I just think he did really good at capturing his own creation.
Yeah. And I don't want to leave ahead if you're going to talk about the podcast, but he talks about inserting, making a game versus making a show. In a game, you have the animations and you can put any detail you want. You can even change the actor or model. But in a show, you have to set this up like a series of dominoes to make it land a certain way. And there's even a point where you put it out there and you just hope you get back what you want. And he talked about being very pleased with what he got back, and I can definitely understand why.
Right.
I draw a parallel with what you guys are talking about with the actors of saying, like, don't watch the original cutscenes if you haven't seen them and stuff, because I think a really good representation of what happens when you try to replicate something or impersonate it is Star Wars. Right. Well, if you look at The Mandalorian and all the stuff that they've done since, they said instead of trying to make a movie that's like Star Wars, we went back to the things that inspired George Lucas, like the old Westerns and stuff, and tried to go off of that instead of replicating it. And so you're instead of trying so hard to fit yourself into this mold of what you think it's supposed to be and just trusting the direction of the people saying this is what you should feel and how you should react, I think you get a more genuine.
Yeah, let the story be your direction instead of trying to fit into a mold.
That's a T-shirt right there. Let the story be your direction.
We'll continue on here. Now, at this point, it is lunchtime. Joel and Tess enjoy some lovely jerky beef.
I was wondering what the hell that was they were eating.
I'm pretty sure it was beef jerky. It was like just really.
It was not as good as her sandwich.
It was not as good as a sandwich. And she's eating a full-on chicken sandwich, which, as you notice, is made with bread. Yeah, and she's eating that. And they're not being offered it. Probably because there's probably still a risk at eating anything flour-based.
I mean, Tessa's reaction to her having chicken, just, is that chicken?
It was pretty, and they're like,
chicken?
They're like, I guess they get it from smugglers. I guess not you two.
Not you two. She gets in her licks, just like the character.
Do you think maybe is that part of the test too? Give it a bread?
I think it also shows, I mean, they don't make it mention, but I think the fact that she's eating bread is very telling.
I think the fact that she's eating such a rich meal indicates her level of importance.
I've heard that too, yeah.
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 So I don't know if you're picking up on clues or if you actually know something based off of the information that you've seen and heard. Is this something that's known in the world, that the grain and stuff? Is that like...
I believe if you play the original game, very early on when you're walking around to Sarah through the house, there is a newspaper in the bathroom, which you could miss. And that reads talking about something like a grain factory or something like that. There is something about that.
But you get what I'm asking is like, do you think the people in the quarantine zone are avoiding grain products?
I would imagine it becomes well known as to where this is coming from. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the factory in Jakarta is long gone.
Yeah. At this point, it's truth time. Tess tells Elliot point blank why she's so important. We've covered this a little bit. Elliot's sworn to secrecy, but buckles almost instantly.
The first people I met.
Yeah.
That's funny.
When she realizes that there is a Firefly camp out west looking for a cure. Joel's not buying it as he's heard it many, many times before. Tess makes the counterpoint that it doesn't matter that if she is or isn't immune, that only the Fireflies believe it. Are you going to say something? Okay.
No, he just nodded at me randomly. And
you look like you had something to say. I didn't want to step on your toes. But whenever she starts rattling off about how she's the key and Joel parodies her word for word, it really gives you a clear sense that he's heard this before.
Thousands of times.
Bullshit as far as he's concerned.
And is all of this running along with how it goes down in the game?
Pretty much, yeah. He's very doubtful of this situation. When he finds out that she's first bit, he's just as protective of himself as you would expect him to be.
In the game, Joel gets to develop his opinion more through action. You're him, so you're doing the brutal activity. You're making the hard decisions. Whereas in this, they have to develop that less personal, and they're using the I can't remember the word, the script, the words for the actor to do it.
Dialogue
is the word. Brain don't work, but I think they're doing a really good job.
Yeah, his motivations in the game are different than this. This is a little bit different. He's going to try to see his brother, which is not really mentioned in the original game. That's not really his motivation. I think it's just a job.
Yeah, I think his twist towards the brother comes later in the game. After some later on failure, he decides the brother's the best option. Whereas here, they're saying that that's his primary motivation.
Yeah, and that she's just a means to an end.
Right. Hold on, before you get the truck, anyone notice? Oh, sorry. No, I'm getting ahead. Let's go.
But I do want to just real quick so that I'm not thinking about this the whole rest of the show and I can focus on what everybody else is saying. Can I make the clarification that even though that we know that it started in the grain factory, that it may have been grain factories everywhere? Are we like, my mentality is going like, oh, those are places that would promote a healthy environment for the fungus to grow in, the original fungus like to spread, or an environment for it to spread.
That's kind of what I was asking whenever I said, are we sure now this is ground zero, or is it possible that's just what we've heard of so
I think if you look into this, that the grain factory there is like the largest supplier of grain in the entire world. I mean, that's a real thing.
But when we get into that terminology, the substrate, it's more important. It's like, so it's not just like, oh, this is where it first came up or anything. It's like that environment specifically promoted for that fungus to thrive, right?
Right.
I just wanted to clarify that as far as my thinking is, that's why it is a connection there. And yes, it's probably the primary ground zero and all of that stuff, but I feel like that is important in some way to...
But I also think this is why it kicks into gear so fast, is because this grain was distributed throughout the world and now everyone's consuming it.
I mean, 20 years later, I think it's safe to say any grain we're consuming or doing at this point, we're growing in our QZ safely and sound separate from the infection.
Theoretically,
probably monitoring.
Well, that chicken sandwich was on bread.
And,
sure.
Right.
And they didn't ask for a bite.
Well, the significance to me is it may, come back later or be significant in some way to the story, because we know that it's an environment where the fungus can thrive and so forth. And so, like I talked about in the last episode about going the further north because of the global, the global temperature and getting to a colder location. And so I'm just kind of trying to piece together in my mind.
Grain is probably increasingly rare living in a northern climate.
Mm-hmm. At that point, Joel does capitulate, and Ellie does ask for a gun at this point, at which point she finds out she'll have to just make do with her sandwich.
Great comment there. Okay, I'll just throw a sandwich at him.
That was cute.
In the next scene, as we're heading out the door, Joel moves an old bookcase blocking a door as a quick nod to the gamers. There you go. Moving things out in front of doors is a very common thing you do in the game.
Frequently, it's a basic interaction you get just to sort of put you in the story and get you settled. Joel.
Yeah, they're always blocking doors with some sort of piece of furniture.
One of the really bizarre things about this game that caught me off guard the first playthrough, because I wasn't so story oriented, was that there were a lot of times where you go through a fairly lengthy cutscene and they would drop you into a situation where you have to move a bookcase and then back to another fairly lengthy cutscene.
Yeah, I feel like watching the show anytime that one character goes to help the other character up, like somebody needs to push the square button.
Right.
Because there's always that.
It's basically in games.
That's the button, but.
Yeah, it's a way of loading in the next zone. You're basically dumping the last zone that you were in from memory and loading the new one in. So there has to be some sort of time delay to allow that to happen. So that's why it happens in the games.
Was probably the technology at the time. You couldn't load nearly as many polygons as you can with a PS5.
Right. So you're freeing up memory and loading into new. That's also why you have areas where you can't go backwards.
Right.
After moving the bookcase, we are presented with probably the most visually stunning post-apocalyptic view that I've seen in a TV show or movie. I mean,
more interesting than the view was Ellie's face.
Yeah, when she sees it, she's us.
That's the first time she's seen that in her whole life. She's been an QZ and she's been surrounded by garbage and monsters her whole life.
Yeah. I mean, as we walk the streets, of course, we see more and more of the decay of everything like that. And just the places that they shot this at. This was all filmed in Alberta, Canada.
There was a minor attack on my bullshit-ometer in that scene with the collapsing building leaning on the other one. Neat. But I don't feel like that building would have continued
structurally. Yeah, I've always been like, would that really hold?
Right.
They filmed in Canada because it's safe, because it's north.
There you go.
There you go.
And there's tax credits, but that's besides the point.
I did do some, because I was trying to figure out what those buildings are in Boston, which buildings that they are. But it's funny because in my Googling, I kind of came across a screenshot from the game, and it is. And I think you said that to me last week. The only difference is there was like a in the screenshot from the actual game, there's like a road, like a sign to the airport or something that's hanging on that's not there in this scene, but it was pretty close.
Yeah, they do make it very close to what you saw in the game. In the game, though, you do actually go into those buildings,
right?
Oh, and you're walking around on these slanted
so do you
things.
Know what buildings they are?
No, they're just buildings. They're a pathway to your destination.
Although it wouldn't blow my mind if somebody went back and told me, no, that's the X, Y, and Z building.
Well, the one looked like, in my trying to figure it out, it looked like the John Hancock building in Boston, but I couldn't figure out what the one leading on it was.
Right.
So
yeah, because
I could be wrong.
Best I could tell is all the foreground stuff is practical, and then there's a defining line where it's all CG. But it is very, very seamless, in my opinion. It looks really great.
It was beautifully done. I mean, if it just wasn't for that odd structural issue, I probably would have been less put off. That's what put me off. I'm just looking at a building leaning on another building. No, that's not how that works.
The birds flew between it, and I thought, oh no.
It made me think of Idiocracy 10,000 years or 500 years in the future when they have the buildings tied together with like string and bungee cords to keep them standing.
As we move on, we see the half-toppled buildings, of course, and then the craters from the bombing and nature reclaiming the streets. Mm-hmm. As we move through the streets, it's decided that the long way through is much preferable to the we're fucking dead way.
Right. Just based on that limited information.
Yeah. Just based on limited information.
That was a great little line.
As we continue to follow our trio through their trek, we are given some more time for exposition. How Ellie got bit. She went to the mall, which is where, of course, you're always going to get bit.
Right.
She was alone. She was totally not alone. How old she is, 14. and Tess presses F to show respect. Do you know that reference? No. Okay, it's a reference to video games. So anyway,
wait, what was the reference?
Press F to show respect.
Wouldn't it be GG?
What game?
Call of Duty. And many other games.
Reference?
Yeah, you're at a funeral, and it says because when you're playing the game, it says press F to pay respect.
It was in the previous scene they were communicating that we caught the first introduction to the concept of clickers, right? She says or is that here?
Well, it's coming up here. This is the very next part where
Sean, you need to slow down.
I will. I apologize. I just watched this. I came so excited, and it's all still probably one point in my brain.
Tess follows up by asking if anyone is going to come looking for her, like her parents or her boyfriend. She says she's an orphan, and a boyfriend, no. At this point, it's time for Ellie to ask some questions. She starts asking about super infected with split open heads that see in the dark like bats.
Right.
Tess denies this, but gives a look back to Joel as if to say she knows.
Whenever Ellie mentions the ones that, the big giant ones that throw spores at you, and Tess says, I hope not. And then she brings up the bat ones. Tess did not respond. She looked back at Joel with
she looks back after both of those questions are asked.
A holy shit moment in her eyes.
It's at this point, and this is another great scene, where they're on this bridge, this overpass, if you will, and they do hear a noise in the distance. That's the first time I think we actually get, the first time we hear a noise of anything.
I was wondering if you guys had any idea what made that noise, because obviously that wasn't a clicker.
We assume it's an infected of some sort, right. Probably a runner.
So Shannon, being it hasn't participated in the game. In the game, they give you kind of a clear classification of your enemies.
Let's also be careful, because I don't know where you're going, but so I'm just, take this with a grain of salt. But we do say no spoilers toward the future of the game too. So if it's stuff that hasn't been introduced in the show yet, make sure we introduce it.
Well, it depends on what you're going to say, but most of the things we're introduced to are in this episode. So
Shannon has heard us more than once already say the word clickers.
Right, and it is established in this show, so that's safe to say.
So in the game, there's some of your basic enemies. They're breaking in fairly unique classifications, and the basic enemy, the first one you meet, are the runners. They can see. That's an important point, and they just basically attack anything at full speed. They run. The second one, after they either evolve, or I'm not really sure how it decides whether or not
it's time-based. It's how infected you are.
Their eyes get swole over from the fungus or just disappear altogether. Their head sort of splits open as and we're getting to this, but the clickers is the second badass, and that's where we're going.
Right. After this, after they decide that they're going to move a little bit faster, I believe we come up on the hotel, and the first thing we see at the hotel are ducks. Ducks, anyone?
That. Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, the ducks.
Quackers. We enter a flooded out hotel. We learn Ellie can't swim, but before Joel has to float her along on a pallet, we realize that the water's not all that deep, just gross. However, not too gross for Ellie to stop from checking her reservation at the desk and find that the desk clerk has gone swimming.
Some great world developing here. She walks into the hotel and says, "Have you guys ever stayed here?" And Joel responds, "How do you know what this is?"
Yeah.
Says, what was her response?
We have books.
We have books. Or I've read a book.
Yeah.
I don't know. It felt a little bit too on point for me, for a kid that would have never experienced any of that. Even the tone and all of that stuff. But I suppose you still have other people making reference to the way that things used to be that she could have picked it up from. But
any number of fictional books that I can think of, based in or around a hotel would have introduced her to those sort of, rowdy guests, the pricks that show up and bang the bell.
A lot of this scene at the hotel is from the game. At least pieces of it are. And the hotel actually comes a lot later in the game, but they're throwing it in right here.
They've already pointed out or made it clear to me that the game is not, or the show's not going to be exactly like the game. Did anybody else's butt clench when she rang the bell 3 times real loud?
Yeah.
Everybody I watched reacting had that exact
What are you doing? And I couldn't believe that Tess and Joel didn't.
There was no response.
Reprimand her for that somehow.
It's a really interesting moment between that happens here. Whenever she starts banging the bell, she shifts the baggage thing, and a dead body falls out, startles her. At which point, Joel comes over, defense mode, and he leans down, kicks the thing in the head, just making triple sure it's dead. It's pretty clearly dead. But when he helps her up, He pulls her to her feet. She holds his hand for just maybe a half a second longer and then pulls away. And you can see he's sort of looking at his own hand. I'm not 100% sure what I made that out to mean.
I think it's a combination of things.
Okay.
It's the fact that that's her infected arm.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also this...
And he has that open cut on his hand.
Yeah, and then there's this intimacy that he's not had any hands on this person.
Right.
And now, and it's someone who's a relative age of what his daughter was, and he's helping her.
Right.
It's that brief little connection that you see in his eyes. He's like, and then he looks at his hand and he does this kind of clenching of his hand. I think there's a lot.
They both have those emotional walls up too, right?
Yep.
Like not just him, but her too, because she doesn't have like a traditional family. She has wherever she's from and her people. But I did want to respond to how Joel and Tess didn't react to the bell also in the hotel. And my impression during this scene is that they travel this route often enough that they expect it to be clear. Mm-hmm. Like they go to that point and they find that the path that they normally travel is no longer accessible. And so to me, I felt like some of that could have been explained away by the fact that, oh, this is somewhere they normally go and it's generally cleared.
And honestly speaking, all the running water and trickling sounds and background noise would have easily masked that at any distance. I can see, them having a level of comfort there with the audio camouflage.
Tess also showed her some concern whenever that all went down. And I think that was kind of the first of what will continue to evolve toward the end of the show, of Tess kind of having a maternal feelings towards, right. Instinct kind of kicks in and she's taking care of this young girl.
It's that motherly vibe that Tess has this whole time. I mean, whenever Ellie's walking along asking the questions, she's usually addressing Tess, and Tess is the one that responds. She gives her relatively honest answers, as a parent might. Mm-hmm. Not too much information, not enough to scare you, but enough to keep you on point. And just mentioning Joel's cut hand, there was a little development there way back in the beginning of the episode where she looks at his broken hand, and it establishes what level of trust they share, because a little handshake is enough for them to shoot a lot of people in the head. But she's looking at his hand jarring, he's got an open cut, and she just knows for whatever reason that's not infection. I trust Joel. He would have said
something.
And that becomes important later.
Trying to think here if it was, and I was pointing out a lot of this is in the original game. At this point, we do go up a few floors, and they comment that after climbing 10 floors, their old knees can't quite take it.
Yeah, that was a great line. Boy, do I feel it at 40 years old.
I had to run up and down the steps a few times at work this morning in the basement, and I can tell you, I feel it right now.
This morning, you were just bitching 10 minutes ago about having to go up the steps too often.
Yeah, but that was because it was the cherry, buddy. Cherry on the top of the
I'm old, and I don't like it.
At this point, we get to the 10th floor, and then we cut across a hallway that dead ends where they collapse ceiling. It's at this point, Tess needs to be boosted over this wall to check on the other side. This is very video gamey. There's a lot of boosting people over walls.
Yeah, it was right out of a video game. Put her up on the wall, and she even looks back with that video game tone. It's pretty messed up back here. I'm going to be a few minutes. And you're like, oh, okay, free time.
The only thing that was missing is the Naughty Dog yellow color that signifies the ledge that you can grab onto. Mm-hmm. Bring on the uncomfortable Joel and Ellie conversation.
Right.
Where we get some more classic Ellie sass and Joel resistance to opening up too much. We learned that Ellie goes to a shitty school and how long infected can live. Let's see. You can put down a gun. Oh, then the scene where Tess is on the other side, and you can hear her on the other side, and she's like, "Put down the gun, Joel."
Right.
She knows that he's going to be on high alert when that happens.
I don't want to open that door.
Any thoughts on this conversation? Yes.
The back and forth.
Let's talk about that
between Joel and Ellie. She did ask about how long these things can live.
Mm-hmm. Pass.
And no, that wasn't a pass though. He answered that one.
Okay.
Is that what you're suggesting?
The first two questions she asked him were answered with a hard pass. Oh, are you and Tess? She does the little finger thing or whatever.
We can go over the whole
Not
thing.
that finger
I was just
thing.
cutting to this part, because I had a question on, and I think you kind of started to touch it a little bit. But what does determine if they're going to live 20 years or 1 to 2 days?
I assume it's just if they get killed by something else.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's just like anything. You just live as long as you live.
And I know we're not supposed to talk about like anything that isn't in this show.
Go on.
But I have to ask, are there like bosses and they're like the badasses that have been around for 20 years?
There are older infected who are more powerful, sure.
Okay.
The way the game plays it isn't so much your normal, you run through a level and get to a big boss and then move on. They use situational bosses. Instead of putting a big bad character, they hit you with more of them or from strange, attack positions, or they pin you down and force you to, deal with them. It's not so much, Sega Genesis where you go through all the little guys and then you get to the one big guy at the end. The end might be a series of little guys. It might be one little guy you have to deal with in a weird way. It might just be a cutscene.
Yeah, well, you've got to figure that last time I played video games on any regular basis.
No, it's a good question.
That's how it went.
And there was a really important point there. If you don't mind talking about the HBO accompanying podcast real quick, there was a scene that actually didn't even make it to the cutting room floor. It wasn't actually developed at all. And they talked about it at this point. If you have you listened to that? So there's a backstory to Tess. Do you want to talk about a little bit about it?
Sure, I'll indulge you.
Okay. All right. Tell us what they told us about.
No, I mean I didn't watch. I didn't see the episode 2 podcast, so I don't have this information.
I apologize. Well, I don't want to wreck it for you, but apparently Tess has a backstory. Tess had a son and a husband at the beginning of the apocalypse. This is something they wrote for a conversational scene between Joel and Tess that just didn't make it. It didn't fit. They didn't have time for it. But she had to kill both her husband and her son.
Oh, wow.
She killed her husband, but couldn't bring herself to kill her son. She shackled him in the basement. And an interesting point about what Joel says right there, some of them have been walking all 20 years, is theoretically her son's still trapped in a basement somewhere, shambling around.
Crazy.
And the director said this. This isn't something I'm making up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, my interpretation, and that actually shines a little bit more light on the subject, but for me, it was kind of like, okay, maybe it depends on the level of the infection or whatever, but it was also kind of another way of setting the groundwork for why there is not just an endless supply of zombies out in this world, is because there is a natural life cycle to these things, and it sounded like most of them do not live a long time, but maybe depending on the type of infection or the degree of infection that they can
Joel's
survive
response
longer.
was mostly a couple of months. Some of them been walking around since the very beginning.
Yeah, 20 years, he says, yeah.
Well, for example, like the one that they find that's in the wall, right? That's up against the wall, and they say, oh, no, this one's gone. Like, clearly, it appears that one just kind of grew into that position.
It ran out of whatever it needed that let it die. Yeah.
Right. So it was not killed by something else, and it wasn't there the last time they were there. So it was a system of, okay, this was the end of the road.
Right. Yeah. I guess just like anything, there's going to be a finite lifespan, and if it can eat and sit there and hang out for 20 years, then it's going to do that for 20 years and get bigger and badder and more gross.
I believe in the previous scene, Tess alludes to the hive mind. Am I jumping the gun there?
You are jumping the gun a little bit. In fact, we're heading to that next. After they do get through the door, we get a wide shot of a courtyard full of infected. Probably one of the more gross scenes, even though you can't even see the real detail. We get a quick and dirty lesson of how infected communicate. Basically, it's a fungal information superhighway. So it's this scene where you see a bunch of motionless infected just laying in the courtyard, and then as the sun crosses them, they kind of react to the sun hitting them, and she basically breaks it down like, you might be immune from the infection, but you're not immune from being torn apart.
Right. She's still under threat. She's not invincible.
Right.
It was very Avatar.
Yeah.
the trees communicating.
Yeah.
The forest.
Yeah, and the commentary at the end, he calls it the wood wide web.
Does he say that?
in the commentary at the end.
Oh yeah, I didn't catch that. Oh, okay, I got you.
So just to point out, this is something right out of reality. There's a great book. I cannot remember the author. It's called Finding the Mother Tree. It's sort of a biography of this woman's life in the jungle, but she grew up raised by scientists. She's one of the early scientists to point out that trees and non-fungal organisms use these, what's the term, myco something or other, fungi to communicate with each other. So over long distances, they're finding that smaller trees grow faster under larger trees because they actually pass nutrients from the trees to the smaller trees.
Yeah, it's called
a shrubbery.
I didn't think I was going to find cause to play that button on this show ever, so I was excited.
This was not in the game.
It's called mycelium.
And I think that this is a very appropriate addition. I think it was just a nice detail.
It especially, I mean, it is exposition, because obviously we see this is like Chekhov's exposition here. They mention this and then this happens. We know this is going to happen, so that does come back into the story here. at this point, we continue on. We're moving off to the museum now, so they have to go a different way this time and basically take the we're possibly fucking dead way. Joel checks out some dry fungus outside the doors and confirms that the museum is like totally safe.
Didn't love that choice. If he really was unsure to whether that thing was dry, he was risking waking up a horde just to figure out if it was dry.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe he was just looking at it and just making sure. I have no idea how.
Very much looking down the barrel to see if there's a bullet in the gun.
And once again, speaking of gun, he denies Ellie a gun at that point as well.
Does she ever get a gun?
You'll just have to find out.
I just have to find out.
To be fair, we don't know, right?
I meant in the game.
Well, that'd be future spoilers.
Right, understood.
Also, the game and the show aren't going to be exactly the same, so we genuinely do not know.
And I was thinking about that earlier. It's kind of weird. This is actually the opposite of a book to a movie, if you think about it. Because like a book, you can never fit all of that content into a movie, right? Like there's so many words and so much to put in. Whereas in a video game, like if you boiled down all the cutscenes from the game, it's going to be very small compared to this entire series. Like most of it is an experiential thing with not a lot of dialogue, except for, the grunting and like the occasional expletive that they say whenever they get shot or run into something.
Right. And that's why I think this works, is because there is a fully fleshed out story with fully fleshed out dialogue. So I think that makes this work.
Not to take a dump on the game, though, I want to point out this is one of my favorite things about this game. There was live conversation and detail delivered during action scenes. There's various scenes whenever you're interacting with Ellie and there's important information. She's just talking to you, asking questions the same way we're seeing here in the show. So like, there is content that probably had to get eliminated because, you can't play the show characters.
Right. Yeah, they do make those contextual, interactions with the other characters. You can choose to engage with them or not, but there's definitely things to be heard.
Right.
Inside the museum, Christ, this place needs a maid.
The Bostonian Museum.
The Bostonian Museum, yes. And the set designers in this case, I think, need a raise. This place looks freaking amazing.
Nailed it.
The aesthetic of the overgrowth is dead on to the game. There's just a lot of, what makes this such a creepy thing in these scenes.
The director uses a very small number of colors in every scene. I don't remember what the technique is called. It adds just a surrealism to it whenever you're looking at it almost through a lens that focuses you at certain points in the screen. And they were able to do some things here that you couldn't do in the game, like they use bright contrasting colors, whereas in the game that might lead you to think, oh, that chair's important, I need to go click on it. You know what I mean? They could do that here, and there's a lot of contrasting color. You'll see that. It was good scene work.
I think it very much, the color palette is very similar. Even the look and feel is very much like the video game. If you play it, you're like, you'll say this is very familiar. Yeah.
These open hall scenes in the museum and when they were outside, it's straight from the game. From the game. It's when it gets a little darker is what I was jumping the gun again.
There were a lot of moments during this episode that I was actually taken out of the show just because of my thinking about like, man, this must have been expensive. Like this is really good, like looks amazing, but like there's a lot of work.
Absolutely.
Had to be a lot of soundstage work here. Had to be.
Yeah. They happen upon a dead body and realize that maybe it's not so safe in here. I also like, this is the scene where he's basically saying we have to be quiet from this point out. We are silent. And I love the way he hits that.
Me too.
That T, that's silent.
It was very satisfying. That's the best way to put it.
I always key on that every time I watch it. And he's like,
yeah.
And actually does a really good job of giving you the experience if you don't have children of what it's like. It's like, we have to be silent, but silent. But
yes,
silent.
Put a little bit more on that last consonant.
We start to head up the stairs, and of course, you get the all the tropes of stepping on things and making noise when you're not supposed to be. Upstairs, they enter a hall that has basically it's an exhibit of a Revolutionary War, a lot of muskets and lots of human-like figures that are going to catch your eye there to break up the scenery there. Just in time for the ceiling to cave in, making just a little bit of noise.
That was when the door closed behind them, right?
That was the entire hallway ceiling caving in.
But just like a video game, you
yes.
no longer go backwards.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yes, we're going to unload that zone from memory and stick here going forward. It's at this point we get the first sound in the game that players know all too well, and that is that first sound of those clickers.
Oh, man. In the game, that was just such a moment. The first time you heard the clickers and you didn't really understand, but the game gives you the idea that you need to get down and shut up. You know, obviously can't speak, but silence becomes very important. And I remember being very worried about what Ellie was going to do, even though it turns out in the game anyway, she didn't have a great, like she could walk right in front of them without triggering them because you were what was important. But in the game, I remember like I'd run across a space and Ellie would be on my heels and there'd be a clicker looking right at her. And all I'm thinking is, you're going to give me away.
Yeah. Oftentimes in companion missions, your companion is your worst goddamn enemy.
Right.
Because they will get spotted and they basically just turn that off. You don't have to worry about Ellie running in front of an affected because she's not going to be seen. So at least they do that for you. From here on out, we get our first clicks and looks and the realization that the infected are a hell of a lot more hard to kill here than they are in the game.
They were a lot harder to kill than I had anticipated.
Right.
Yeah, that was a lot of reactions.
I do have a question too about whenever you're playing the game. Is it often that you're able to just travel by very carefully and get away from them, or do you end up having to actually fight them a lot?
You can sneak past them. The clicker specifically.
It's my preferred manner of doing it.
So that's what I was wondering.
Stealth.
So that's not so much easy, but it is very possible to do that.
And they also can't see because you have a flashlight in the game too, and they can't see your flashlight.
Okay.
Right. Not only that, but this is a world where resources are very limited. So like you do not want plus noise draws more, right? So you don't want to engage if you can help it because it's just very difficult
much like
to
any zombie game. You don't want to shoot a gun. You're just
if you can take them out silently, that is what you're going to want to do. Absolutely.
This scene had me thinking, Joel, I hope you have a shiv, and if not, I hope you have some duct tape and some whatever the three materials are
to make bombs.
This is a very important change from the way the game operates, because ideally in the game you would sneak past these things and have zero interaction with them. And these startling moments that you run into in the show, you need that to keep the pace up. So you know, they get to do more. And how about that first moment when you saw that clicker's face and his flashlight when it discovered him? My God.
I paused it just so I could take it in a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
I like the part where they're behind the gun cabinet and the clicker's on the other side.
Right.
And as it comes around and they get a nice clear shot of it and Ellie's reaction, she's just like trying desperately not to panic, but she catches her breath just a tiny bit and it turns back. And that's when, that's the scene from the trailer right there.
There was an important detail from the primary podcast. This scene was actually re-added in later. They tried to develop the clickers can't see, but they can hear with some of the earlier moments that we talked about already. But I believe it was one of the writers, I'm not sure, she came back and said, I don't understand why the clickers can't see. That as a viewer, if I've never played the game, there's no reason that doesn't make sense to me. So they wanted to deliver that. They wanted you to know it. So they went back and they created that scene, that wonderful little scene where Ellie's looking at Joel, you kind of looking over her shoulder at his face, and he puts his finger to his mouth and mouths the words, they can't see, but they can hear.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really important.
I think it's interesting that they subtitle that, even though you can't actually hear him talking.
Right.
But they do subtitle that he says those words.
I had subtitles on it. I did not notice. I did not notice.
He says that right there.
There were so many shadows. It would have been really hard to read his lips.
Yeah.
So I do want to ask here. I get very much vibes in this scene for one specific other movie, and I'm going to start with Shannon, then Sean, then Mal. I want to see if there's any movie scene that's like iconic that you think of this. Anything?
Think of what?
Of this scene with them in the museum trying to hide from the clicker and not make noise. I think Sean's on it.
I'm on it too.
Go for it then, you guys.
At the same time, 3, 2, 1.
Jurassic Park.
With the velociraptors in the
Never would've
kitchen.
gone there.
Yeah, 100%. I'm like, oh, it's the raptor scene in the kitchen.
I have it right here.
Oh, no kidding.
That's funny that you thought of that ahead of time.
Yeah.
I did until he said it. There's another important
Boys
note
only
here.
think about one thing, and it's disgusting. Dinosaurs.
They show the first clicker. You very clearly can see he doesn't have eyes, but we've already established that was hard to tell without the other scene. They did not use CGI. So for all that vivid colors and all that wonderful makeup was makeup. They insisted on practical effects.
I watched the commentary at the end. They went over this very thoroughly.
Yes.
In fact, they tried different looks, but they ultimately ended up going with
The practical.
What the game had, because they wanted to make sure that they were staying true to that.
I think what really helps them out too is that in the game you can actually there's actually a place in the game where you can look at the character models themselves in high resolution. So they have high resolution character models of what all the infected look like, what Joel and Ellie look like. They have everything that the art departments can really just lean on in terms of creating these things.
You'll notice the clickers look a little different. They didn't, like I said, they didn't want to use CGI, so they didn't split their heads open in all the scenes the way they did in the game. They used makeups and perspective and forced perspective to make it look as you might see that. But that first clicker you see, he's got like a swollen brain thing going on covering his eyes. That's deviates from the way they look in the game.
But their movements, they nailed those.
So, and they said that in the commentary too, that the two actors that played those, they were actual fan gamers.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So because they knew they would understand the movement and exactly what needed to be delivered.
Were they cosplayers? Did they actually dress up like that too?
Didn't tell me that. But
I bet they did. Yeah.
They had a core of people who were very happy to put on the makeup.
Oh, of course.
And they were super stoked. And he said they nailed not only the motions of the clickers that they established them in the game, but they nailed the audio. Some of the clicks and sounds we were hearing were actually the...
Oh, really? That's cool.
Makes me think of the behind the scenes from the Star Wars documentaries where the little boy got to play the Ewok. And like was mimicking, I don't know, it's reminiscent there. But does that mean that the Velociraptor was the original clicker? Like with their toenails?
His twitching toenail?
I don't know, but watching them play the scenes without the CGI on the actors playing the Velociraptors is fucking hilarious.
Oh, in Jurassic Park? Yeah, it is. Another thing I want to point out here is a couple of things that I noticed is when he does catch up to Ellie around the cabinet and they kind of backtrack and he steps on the glass and when that clicker comes over the top.
Oh my God.
The attention when he's holding it off to have him holding his left hand up there and in clear view is that watch.
Yeah.
I did not catch that.
It's just no one else I watched pointed that out to, and I'm just like, there's a reason why his watch is center frame.
There was such, it was a pause. There was just short of a pregnant pause after that sound happened, enough to give you time to go, oh shit. And then this thing was flying at him in a full tackle.
I felt like that moment really does a good job of capturing what it feels like to play this game. Because Shannon was asking earlier, can you sneak by them? Yes, and I often tried. However, I feel like I would spend 10 minutes trying to constantly stay out of this thing's hearing area and stuff, and just not make any noise. And sometimes you can't, he's blocking where you need to go. So you go, okay, I'm going to try to go around this way. And then he moves and is back and forth and back and forth. And so you really build up this anxiety. Mm-hmm. And then you almost have it. And then you bump into something and it's on top of you. And I'm like, this is exactly why I never replayed this game.
And that is exactly what happened to them. They were trying to be so careful. And
another important detail from the game that we learned through this interaction is how precious ammunition becomes. Mm-hmm. He unloads his pistol into the first one that they fight and runs out of ammo pretty quickly. So later on, whenever he addresses the second one with the long rifle, it's not so much save my life. It was pow. Pow, and that's the way the game goes because you run out of bullets real fast. Mm-hmm. You learn to get sneaky and aim at the head as much as possible.
Yeah, like I said, I watch a speedrunner do this, and he's like, "I'm gonna pick. I know where the ammo spots are. I know where I can get ammo. It's like I'm gonna need 3 rifle rounds for this. I'm gonna need 2 arrows for that." He knows exactly what he's gonna need to kill each thing through that game. So yeah, the scarcity of resources is the number one thing that really keeps you from just going in guns blazing.
I remember when I bought the game, it was Corey that encouraged me to do it, and I remember you telling me, hold on to your bullets, man. Bullets aren't cheap. They don't come easy.
I'm used to doing that. I end up at the end of the game with 30 health potions walking through. Like, do I have enough? I don't want to spend these. I'm going to die.
So if he had gotten a good shot, I'm so sorry, Sean.
No, by all means, continue.
If he had gotten a good shot to the head, would that have been enough, or was it?
Generally, yes. Okay. But I mean, that one he did get when it ran at him, he got it in the neck, and that was enough. Well, I mean, that was enough, but he ended up still having to shoot it again. Yeah. Generally, headshots, just like in every other movie, is where you want to be.
Generally.
And we assume, because we don't have enough data for how they're going to do it in this show, but yeah, theoretically, right, getting that headshot.
Well, so the art for the mushrooms, I mean, I've seen stuff like that on the trees in the woods. They can be pretty hard. So I was wondering if that could be almost like a helmet to them, that it might not penetrate.
I'm not sure if it's that or just that they're just so infected in other places that even though you take out that chunk, they got more.
So in the game, whenever you see the clickers, their heads are split open. So a headshot, the brain might still be intact. Headshots do seem to affect them more severely than body shots. But I do remember some pivotal points in the game where I put 1 or 2 rounds into the head of the thing, you know, and sitting there thinking, that was a headshot, but this thing's still coming towards me.
Yeah.
It really puts you in that on your heels a lot with that mechanic.
They also value stealth in the game. So if you can get a stealth kill, they're generally easier to kill than if they're fully on you at that point.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else from the museum there?
No, just very well done.
Oh, absolutely. I think
wonderful.
So too.
And I do like how they made the makeup was different from one to the other. Like,
yeah, they're unique.
Brilliant orange. The other one's more of the white. And again, both of those, I've seen that in the woods so many times.
The last great reference to the game that I want to point out here is we see Tess get attacked by one of these things and sort of pulled out of the scene. And this is the first time we see that mechanic between Joel and Ellie where she's stuck on his heels, as you saw in the game.
Yeah. I also think it's funny. This is a scene in the game where you run into this area and you do get caught up in that. And in the game, you know, you're in charge of keeping track of Tess and Ellie.
Right.
And if they get attacked or if they have a clicker on them, they'll get a little plus symbol above their head saying you have to go over there and help them.
I forgot about that mechanic.
So I was just like, I just kept thinking that. I was like, oh, he's going to see plus symbols over their heads.
So go back to like the production, the budget, and all the behind the scenes stuff like that. Then I can't help but feel for HBO going like, man, if you only had Disney's volume that they're shooting all of their shows in, like that would be the perfect environment for all these small enclosed sets.
They do have access to the volume because they used it in Hot D, in House of the Dragon. It's being used.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, they have access to that.
I wonder how much they're getting, because that would make.
I don't feel like any of this was shot on the volume, at least as far as I can tell.
Well, again, I mean, the volume is like kind of gives things away because it's a small area when they're trying to do the big wide open daylight scenes, but for like darkly lit stuff that's in a confined space, it's
and just so anyone listening might know what the volume is, it's basically a set where they can customize what everything looks like. So you would set decorate just about 20 square feet in a big circle around them, but the whole walls and ceiling is all LCD screens. So they can put real life scene instead of having a green screen back there where you can't see what you're looking at. They can put images on those screens.
Not only that, but the light from those screens like hits the people too, so you don't have to use as much lighting. And when the camera moves, it works like a camera in a video game. Like the background will move with it, so to give you that perspective instead of having that like painting in the background type of green screen.
That's some cool
thing.
tech. I was sitting here dumbfounded.
You got to watch
the volume. What the hell is he talking
about? Disney Plus. Disney
That's
Plus.
why I was mouthing you. I'm like, do you know what they're talking about?
Yeah. If you were standing in there, it might look awkward and out of shape to you. But if you were at the camera's lens, it would look like the image of what you see on the show.
It's instant feedback.
So, for example,
those lighting references that that get screwed up in other movies when you background it with CGI. That's brilliant.
You watch Disney Plus. There's one of those little short, documentary things about the volume, which they go into like full detail, and it is really cool. Like basically, they'll put like a couple of rocks in the middle, and it'll be this big empty room, and you think you're in a hangar on Tatooine or whatever. It's really cool.
One of the things I saw it in first was in House of the Dragon when they are confronting them on the bridge in the very first episode where they come in and Rhaenyra comes in on the dragon. That little section of bridge is only about as like long as this table is. They're all standing right there. Everything else around them is on basically LCD screens all around them.
I would never have guessed.
Yep, it's very well done. It just gives them so much flexibility, and it also lets the actors see what they're actually acting in.
Too.
I highly recommend anybody checking that out if you haven't already. It's really short, and they give some detail on how Favreau evolved that technology through doing a couple of films to become what it is, and it's pretty badass.
I mean, one of the easiest ways to pick up on bad CGI is looking at the edges. You see where it changes from reality to a computer generated image, and the bullshitometer goes off. The
uncanny valley.
Uncanny valley kicks in. Yeah.
So we'll continue from there. We do escape from the museum completely unscathed.
Hold on, I do have one.
Yes, go right ahead.
Whenever they asked if Ellie was okay, and she said, "Well, I didn't shit my pants." Did anybody pick up on a little accent?
Oh, her accent.
Oh, it sounded. She had a little bit of an English accent.
That's so funny.
To my ear, anyhow.
Yeah, she actually talks about the first words she learned were swear words, like to speak in American.
And I listened to it probably 3 or 4 times just to I'm like, yeah, I definitely.
That reaction and her fairly nonchalant response becomes important.
Yeah. She does also point out in that, I said they escaped from the museum completely unscathed, except for Ellie getting bit. Oh, and Tess twisting her ankle, but other than that, completely unscathed.
Ellie was
problems.
bit.
I think she was scratched, wasn't she?
She
that was what it would appear to be.
Well, she got injured by a infected. That's what we know.
Okay. She also had some scratches on her neck that I noticed while, like, during the fight. I had like paused it.
Yeah.
So can the infected infect you through a scratch too? I realize she's immune, but that wouldn't be of concern, just a bite?
I think there would have to be some sort of biting access, or there could be something to an open wound, but I think that would be been brought up to us before. Been brought up to us before.
They might be telling you that whenever she touches his hand, that hand moment, like, fearing that contact of any kind, and
that's telling. Yeah.
So like if we're going to engage as that was potentially risky behavior, then I would imagine that, and that might also go to like how far into the infection the host is, right? Like if you're recently infected and you don't have fungus all over your body, maybe not so bad.
This was exposition into how confident Ellie is in her immunity. She's 100% sure of it. If it could have happened to any one of us, at least it was me.
Right. Yeah. She says, if it had to happen to anyone.
And she makes a wise ass joke. She's not concerned.
At this point, we do head outside through a window, and Ellie is sent across while Joel and Tess have a conversation. Now, this scene where she crosses that bridge is right out of the video game. That's directly lifted off. I mean, so that's scene for scene. Actually, this whole scene from them leaving to going down that ladder is all from the video game.
Okay, so I did have a question about one that's coming up, and whenever she says, Arlick had to run out anyway, and I think that's a little bit farther down. Yeah. Is that from a cutscene? Because it sounded like dialogue from a cutscene.
That is a direct quote.
It Which just scene? Fit.
This comes later. When
sorry, I jumped.
No, you're fine.
I jumped.
You're fine. I'll get to it.
We'll get to it.
Just remember that note. Ellie is sent across, and Joel Tess and Joel have a conversation, but there's clearly something on Tess's mind. She dismisses Joel, saying, "How about you just take the good news?" So they're bandaging up her ankle, and that's totally all that's wrong with her. Where he says it's everything you hope for, the jury's still out, but you can't deny that view. That's a direct lift. As she walks away, Joel does check his watch again.
Did you see the look he gave her when she said, "You can't deny that view"? He looked at her like she was crazy.
Right.
Like the look he gave her was really weird.
Yeah. I feel that was in the game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I feel like that moment was in the game because that was the way you figured out when it was time to go to sleep or go to work or whatever you had to do. These scenes would come up with these just, life's not all bad. And that's whenever you'd hit save, put the controller down and, go take a...
Yeah, this is the break you take. At this point, we move on. As we're walking down, there is an interesting scene here. If you catch it on a second viewing, when Tess is walking, she turns around to say something to them. You can see that she has that mark on her neck already. Just outside the City Hall building, it's quiet, too quiet. A blood trail leads them inside where where clearly a plan did not come together. The Fireflies are dead, and Tess becomes distraught and frantic. Joel wants to go back home, but Tess is a little less thrilled with that prospect. It's at this point Ellie realizes the truth. Tess has been infected.
Yeah, that hit pretty hard whenever I learned it. You go back and rewatch some of the earlier scenes, and there's going to be a lot there where you're watching for like the scar on her neck or the way Joel handles working with her, like just little tender moments, and you're going to be like, oh, she's hiding that, or she's doing this, or she's doing that.
You're freaking me out, Corey.
I like having the ability to just bring those little subtle things in and watch the room like one by one, everybody kind of looking around going, where the hell is it coming
It's not
from?
at all distracting when you're talking, you just roll on.
When you
says the guy whose wife is literally beating him in the arm right now.
What?
Shannon, you talk.
Sean, whenever you said that you were, I think you said you were surprised or something. So this doesn't happen in the game?
Which part?
Tess being infected
at
this point.
No, this is all.
Okay, so were you surprised when you were playing the game? Is that what you meant?
No, in the game, you almost expect something to happen whenever you have that set up. I like this actress.
I don't know. You didn't use the word surprise, but you said it hit you hard, I guess.
It did.
Yeah. Obviously this all happens in the game. In the game, it's a little bit more of a shock because you don't realize that she You get scared that she might have, but it doesn't come up. There's a long delay between when you're doing this playing and the time you get to the city hall.
Mm-hmm.
It happens a little quicker here. So when they realize she's been infected, after showing the progression of the bite versus Ellie's, this is another important reason why I think they had her get bit in the museum, to show. I mean, the thing on her arm is weeks old apparently, but this just happened, and that just happened on Tess. And look at Tess and look at Ellie. This is her way of saying, this is fucking real, Joel. And that's the basically same line she uses. This immunity is real.
But this is the moment where you believe she believes.
Yeah. She's fully on board with, getting Ellie to where she needs to be. And she pleads with Joel to keep going, to get to Frank and Bill's place, who we haven't met yet, to, hand her off.
I want to ask, you did say Tess was bit. We know this.
Yes.
You said it was on her neck?
Yeah.
It was on her clavicle over here.
They show it.
Was she not bit on her ankle as well?
No.
Yeah, I think she just broke her.
She twisted her ankle. That was her excuse as to what happened.
But I mean, I think she probably did legit twist her ankle too.
But if you notice during that scene before they cross over the ladder bridge, her hair and jacket are draped over her right shoulder, protecting.
I noticed
that under view
on one of the second or third watch
where Joel is tending to her foot or her ankle. I
right.
don't know if that's later or
no. That's right there.
You can watch her very clearly holding her pant leg down and wrestling the tape off of him before he gets to that spot. I feel like she.
I think she just wants a moment, and she's just like, leave me alone. She just wants. She knows what's happened. In fact, you can actually see blood going on her jacket where the infected might have grabbed on and then slid off. So yeah, that's very.
So I know none of the people in this room, on microphone are particularly religious, but is anybody else picking up a parallel that I didn't notice until we're talking about the scene of Christ and the two thieves on the cross, where Ellie's the savior and freaking she's at the last second kind of converting and going oh no, this is the Messiah kind of deal, and you still have I don't know.
I guess if I grew up in a religious household, my mind might have snapped there.
I don't think it's intentional. I'm just going that's kind of an interesting parallel that's developing in my head here,
I mean, it goes back to her scene where she's laying in that beam of sunlight. I mean, she is the savior. At least that's what we're supposed to think.
That's what she's the key, the cure. She's the light in the way here. So I think that's a great parallel to notice.
Well, I feel like that's what's happening with Tess, right? I feel like in this moment where she sees an opportunity to do something good, and then also in that moment realizing, oh, I can't do anything. I'm done here. This is the end of my story, and kind of having this revelatory experience.
She says it pretty clearly.
Yeah,
I'm not going home.
Yeah, and she even said, you got to make this right, or you got to, for all the shit we've done.
Exactly.
Yeah, make everything right again. Yeah.
Yeah. She's oh no, there was still hope, and we did all of this stuff. You have
it can't
to
be for nothing. Yeah,
it means something, right?
I think another thing that's very clear here is the relationship is a little bit expanded upon with Tess and Joel, where she says, pleading with him, that I've never asked you for anything not to feel the way I felt. Mm-hmm. And even just saying that now, that kind of hits me. It's she loved him.
Oh yeah,
I think 100%. She loved him, but he would not reciprocate.
They were Thunder buddies for life.
Yeah.
No, I think Joel loved her.
I don't think he'd let himself care about anyone ever again, and that is the mode that he is in.
I think there are some very key moments, mostly through fear or shock in this episode, where Pedro Pascal really sells that Joel is not completely closed off. He's not lost. There are still things that'll, kind of catch his soul a little bit. And
I think clearly, yeah.
They're just buried a little deeper.
I mean, he wears that watch. I mean, clearly there is room for something, but
still here.
Him having the feelings and him allowing himself to have intimacy with another person are two different things, right? He can clearly very much care for her and be concerned for her, but also close himself off to go, no, I'm not going to put myself in a position where I can be hurt that way again.
Yeah. He's not going to give her love, for example. So, I mean, it's not going to happen. While they're conversing, an infected suddenly wakes up only to be put down with one shot. This has the unfortunate side effect of sending out the bat signal to just about every infected in the area. We do get this great scene of how the information superhighway works here with these tendrils coming off the fingers and going into the ground. We then see all these infected wake up and
the mycelium network.
Yeah, and they're coming. She's like, how many are out there? He's like, all of them. It's at this point where Tess goes into overdrive, basically, setting the trap so that she can, try to do what she can as she stays behind to basically, do her best to be the Ripley from Alien here, to basically go face to face with this thing.
Can I ask, was that another straight from the game, save who you can?
Save who you can, I think, is a direct lift. I cannot remember if that line is, but I think it is.
Save who you can save. That's what she said.
Now, this scene does play out a little bit differently in terms of the specifics. So in the game, it's Fedra who come to... They shot all the Fireflies.
Okay.
This was a great point that the director made in the...
No.
Spoiler? Okay. No, I don't know. I think we're right there.
It's just an alternative way of this scene went down. Instead of it being infected chasing them down, it's actual military.
Okay.
In the video game, you're having this scene. You find out Tess's bit, and then you hear Fedra outside or approaching in some way, shape, or form, and that's when she chases you off and says, "I'll buy you some time." And in the director's comment, the accompanying podcast, they explain this by saying, "Why would Fedra be there?"
Yeah.
And I remember that occurred to me when I was playing the game. What are they doing here? Were they just chasing down the Fireflies?
So that's why they made this big shift.
Yeah, there's no reason for Fedra to be
other than they knew the Fireflies might be there and they're their enemies. But you're right. There was no real reason. They didn't know that Joel and Ellie and Tess were out there to begin with. So why would they know that the Fireflies were out there? But again, that is the conceit there, that instead they changed it to infected this time. That's basically the biggest change.
Which is great too, because then you get an opportunity to really see how they operate a little bit more than you would if it would just be human on human fight. That's
right.
Boring.
Again, I don't know if it was CGI. I assume it was practical effects given the director's commentary, but those clickers that were getting up off of the ground, slightly blurry in the back with our one primary clicker in the front. I mean, that was eerie. Some of them literally just stood straight up like Jack Skellington. The movements were disturbing. It was great.
Right. And this is where we basically get the worst kiss ever seen on screen.
Oh my
This was the most. Dude. I sat there. Why is she not moving her mouth?
I did not like that scene at all the first time I watched it. I didn't like that scene the second time I watched it. The third time, I hated it even more, but I understood it.
So, do you guys have an eye? Could you be able to tell me this, or maybe know otherwise, whether or not that was some sort of CGI, or was there actually something being shoved into her mouth from this other guy's mouth?
That had to be CGI, right?
That's what I was thinking.
I don't know. I have no idea.
They probably had some practical effect. You know what I mean? Something poking.
I assume all the movement is CG. Yeah.
So there's a lot of anxiety in this. I'll go back to my blasphemous analogy of this act of contrition on her behalf. But man, what a slow, drawn out, anxiety-inducing situation. So first of all, let me ask, in this moment with the worst French kiss of all time, this clearly does not feel like the type of behavior you expect. You expect them to jump on and just take people out. Do you think they can sense the fact that she's already infected, and that is why they're not straight mauling her, and why there's this tender display of weirdness?
I think it goes both ways too. I think the fact that she was so kind
calm,
of receptive to it, like not you could tell she was still somehow within her normal human mind, because she was still trying to light that light.
She's like
she was letting this happen a little too easily, that I don't think
she was absolutely
I don't
frozen.
think healthy Tess
she was non-threatening. She was not trying to attract too much attention, because she wanted as many of them to come into the room as possible. And if you pay attention on the second watch through, you'll catch her lighter clicks are slowing down. She's converting. She's changing.
Or just terrified. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, she's trying not to set off the powder keg, but then she's
absolutely
kind of
they're going to tear her apart,
giving into this. Oh shit, it's over, and then gets it at the last second. But was anybody else irritated by the fact that there was a room full of grenades and she's messing with the old Zippo? Like, why didn't you just pull the fucking pin on a grenade? And I mean, that would have been cooler, but maybe less dramatic.
There's grenades.
There were a couple moments in this episode, just a little criticism that I thought yeah, you know what's going on here. Like earlier, whenever they come upon all these dead fireflies, they walked right past a perfectly good truck.
Yeah.
And I know that Tess had a good reason for storming in there, but
well, there were more than just the truck, though. There was a whole bunch of other supplies, which we saw in that hallway. So once they were in the door, there was no going back out front.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, they could have, sure.
I mean, at that point, and I think Joel's hollering at Tess before she went in there, Tess, was indicative of his. He would rather get in that truck and drive away.
Just
and
leave the
forget
kid.
this situation.
We got her here. Let's go.
Yeah.
You don't need to investigate any farther.
Possible.
I feel like too they probably could have just done better off without the grenades at all, because you had all those big barrels of flammable
you needed something
liquid.
to explode, though.
No, they already had one of the barrels was tipped over and there was oil all over the place. So if she hits the lighter and drops it, the same exact thing happens.
I'm going to go ahead and defend Tess's poor decision by saying she had a killer fungus taking over her brain.
No, I'm good. I'm saying I feel like they shouldn't have put the grenades in the scene. Then you wouldn't be drawn to the idea of the decision at all. And you could have been like, okay, the lighter makes sense.
Yeah, because you can also say the same that why didn't Ellie and Joel take any of his grenades? But they were just getting the fuck out. So.
Well, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
And her last wish, the way she said to Joel, you know, what she wanted and what she had to do, and Joel's reaction. He grabbed Ellie by the arm and ran out of there. Ellie resisting the whole damn way because she didn't want to leave Tess, her new mother figure.
Yeah. I also think this gives us some behavioral characteristics of the different infected. I mean, you mentioned this before. You have the runners. Now, a class they don't really mention here, but this is more stalker behavior. Mm-hmm. These are the slow-moving, methodical ones, where they will stalk you and slowly prey on you. This is more of the second game, I think, more than necessarily the first game. But this is definitely characteristic of those type of creatures. So they're a little bit more aware. They're not as frantic. They're not as twitchy. So they'll just kind of saunter up to you and stalk you and prey on you.
Okay, is there a name for the ones that are connected, or is that exactly what the stalkers are? The ones that were connected?
They're just all connected.
They're all connected.
Yeah, all the infected are on some level
they were all kind of like hanging together. So we've got stalkers, clickers, and runners. Are there going to be more? You don't have to tell me them now.
No. You have your basic infected, which is just anyone who's been bitten, and then you have your runners. Those are the more friendly. That's grandma in the beginning. Okay. And then most of these guys running after them. Then you would have something like a stalker. These are like, they've been infected
like
for a
World
while.
War Z zombies,
but they're much more
Walking Dead zombies.
They're much more cognizant of kind of what they're doing and how they're operating. And then you have the full-on clickers. And then what you have after that, we don't know yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Pretty much after that, you said that he drags her from the place. They escape just in time to witness Tess successfully detonating the pursuing infected and sadly herself.
That long, slow kiss was gross.
Yeah.
And that was, from what I understand from the director's commentary, pretty intentional. His own words were, I think anything penetrative is pretty gross. And I don't think he's wrong.
Yeah, I think they sold that well.
But you couldn't look away, could you?
No.
Yeah.
The episode basically ends on a lone Ellie with her back towards the town hall there. And I think that's that was a good place to wrap that up. Any final thoughts? Anything else that you guys want to dredge up, or notes that you had that you wanted to speak about?
I think this is a slow burn on the first watch through. I know a lot happens and there's a lot of shocking moments, but if you don't catch the details in between with a rewatch, you're missing a lot. You should go back and watch it again.
I don't feel like it, I thought the pacing was really good. I will say I'm really happy that I got the setup working for us to watch this in our basement, because the first one we just kind of watched on the regular TV upstairs because I was having technical difficulties, but having the 7.2 surround sound and the big TV in a dark room, I think was definitely very beneficial in this situation, to have the environment where you could really immerse yourself in that anxiety.
Genuinely jealous of your audio configuration, Corey.
Did any of you guys watch the preview for the next episode?
I did not. I generally don't do it just because I don't want to. I caught the very first section, and we do get a little glimpse of someone who's going to be
very excited to meet Rich Offerman's character and what he so lovingly calls the New World Order jackboots.
Well, we definitely look forward to that.
Rich Offerman, do we know who he's playing?
It's first of all, it is not Rich Offerman.
Right.
It is Nick Offerman.
I'm sorry, I keep saying
it is. He is one of the people. He is not one of the high and mighty. He's Nick, not Rich. I'm just joking about Rich status. No, Nick Offerman.
Nick Offerman. I apologize.
The man's every man's man. You don't know who Nick Offerman is? You do. What's his name in the show?
We talked about him last week after the podcast. We could talk again.
Fair enough. I think though. I think right now I'm going to vote that next week's we'll have to have an official drink, and we can drink the Lagavulin Offerman edition.
There you go.
There you go.
Delightful.
Well, if that's all we have, I thank you all for joining me once again, and
thanks.
Hopefully we can keep on doing this, and I hope you enjoyed
all week.
Absolutely, enjoy the next episode, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks everybody.
Don't forget to subscribe.